Very good morning to one and all. So only because of pandemic corona, we couldn't able to teach in the class. And so far as the classroom teaching is concerned, very good interaction is there, and we have a very good source of discussion at the time of teaching regarding the topic, its background, and its theme overall. So, come to the topic. We have already discussed about the two parts. First one is the My Greatest Olympic Prize, written by Jesuits, and the second one on examinations, Winston Churchill. The third one, it is the Portrait of a Lady. It is being written by Khushwant Singh, the great Indian writer from Punjab. And Khushwant Singh is one of the most versatile writers of our time. He has distinguished himself as an outstanding journalist, novelist, historian, and story writer. A writer of international repute. He has born on 2nd February 1915, who is a prominent Indian English writer and a journalist. So, his weekly column with Malays towards one and all, carried by Indian newspapers is among the most widely read columns. And he is famous for his columns, and whatever he had experienced about his surroundings, he had established his views in a very neat level way and almost gives a very good message to the society. That's why he is almost very popular, not only in India but also all over the world. Here is the topic, the Portrait of a Lady. The Portrait of a Lady gives a vivid account of the writer's grandmother. She was affectionate, protective, and caring. So here Khushwant Singh almost told about his own childhood, how it is being cared, being protected by his old grandmother, who was a very pious lady. So far as the old grandmother is concerned, he almost takes the right care of his own kid by way of waking up from the bed, preparing for the school, and almost teaching them the noble things from the great scriptures. It was just all we know, that the great elders almost guides us in that respect. This is the culture of our society, the great heritage of India. Here, Khushwant Singh, what sort of care he had got at the time of his childhood by his old grandmother, who was almost cared him more than 20 years. So, come to the topic. Who doesn't want, or who doesn't enjoy the great company of grandmother? So far as the grandmother is concerned, they are very lovable, they are very caring, and in the way of, if you commit something wrong also, if a parent is almost run after you, then you must go near the grandpa or grandmother, because in their presence nobody can threaten you, nobody can beat you, nobody can do anything wrong to you. That's why we love our grandpa or grandparents a lot. We used to hear a lot of stories by way of great scriptures and how to sustain the great culture and heritage of our times. So let's study the topic, the Portrait of a Lady, written by Khushwant Singh. What sort of care really he had got? We have to discuss a lot in this topic. My grandmother, like anybody's grandmother, was an old woman. Obviously, grandmother belongs to old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. Obviously, only because of the aging factor. His face is almost very crisscross wrinkles everywhere, and he was in this age. People are looking very ugly, but so far as the grandma is concerned, she was looking very pretty. Why she was looking pretty? She was looking pretty only because of that. The author Khushwant Singh loves her a lot. If you love your mummy or something like that, how much is really she will earn? Obviously, she looks very, very beautiful unless and until you have a love, affection, and care with you. So, here, so far as she had been old and wrinkled for 20 years that I had known her, people said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. Why it was hard to believe? Obviously, a grandmother must have a husband. So only because of that, it is very hardly believed, but it is yet to be believed. I couldn't believe so. Why it was hard to believe that grandmother had a husband? Because she was looking so young and pretty, whereas her husband was looking very old, as if he was 100 years of age and a lots and lots of grandchildren. That's why it was very hard to believe grandma as he had a husband. My grandmother's portrait hung above the mantelpiece. Mantelpiece is the great shelf, there. The shelf is there. The portrait had been hanged just above the mantelpiece, and it is in the drawing room. Now, the poet was going on. No, so the author is going on expressing about the great appearance of the portrait, his grandfather. He wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. That was their tradition. So far as the Sikh is concerned, they used to wear a very big turban and almost loose-fitting clothes, His long white beard almost covered the best part of his chest. That means his beard almost elongated the best part of his chest. And he looked at least 100 years old. That's why it was very hard to believe that the grandma had a husband. He didn't look the sort of person who would have a wife or children, because he was looking too old, whereas it's a great comparison in between grandpa and grandma. Grandpa was looking too old, as if the 100 years old, whereas grandma was looking pretty and beautiful. That's why it was very hard to believe that once grandma had a husband. So as for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. Revolting means opposing. We couldn't believe that because grandma was young and pretty, whereas grandfather was looking very ugly as well as very old. That's why it was almost revolting. We cannot believe such and such. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. That seemed quite absurd and undignified. Undignified means disrespectful on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. So, whenever grandma was going on telling about him, about what he had been playing games in her childhood. This is the age of digital age. Each and everybody almost long for to go for mobiles, video games, and so many things like that. Nobody wants to hear that they are going on playing the Bojori, Kuchipudi, and so many things like in the ancient time it was being played there then. So he was not at all interested of why grandma was going on telling all these things what exactly she had been playing in her childhood. So it was completely absurd. Absurd means it's a very wrong factor. He had no such interest about to listen to her grandma. And though he was near her and she was so affectionate, so caring, that's why she used to hear, but as if it was like the fables of a prophet. There are a large and large people being assembled to hear the great pravachan, and there, if you have a certain temperament to listen, you have a certain interest, then you must listen to them. Without such and such, now the world is a digital age, so nobody wants to spare some time to go for listening the great scriptures of our land, the great teachings of our ancestors. Nobody. It was just as if the great fables it was being heard from this year and released from this year. So undoubtedly he had no such interest to listen what grandma was going on telling about her past days. She had always been short. Short means dwarf, little height, and fat, something like only because of due to age, and slightly bent. Bent means slightly down because of the old age. Her face was a crisscross wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. Crisscross means the great foldings of the skins almost spreads everywhere only because of the old age. No, we are certain she had always been, as we had known her, old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. So it was obviously a question arised that really the age had not any impact over his grandmother. Obviously, great factor was there. It had great impact over her age, but because he loved his grandma a lot, only because of that he couldn't notice all these things, all this aging factor of what exactly it represented over her face. He never minded also. That's why old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at same age for 20 years. Obviously, the writer was with her, obviously around 20 years. She hobbled around the house. Hobbled means walking with some extent pain or in a bent manner. Hobbled about the house in spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and other telling the beads of her rosary. The great Jopamari, right? It is going on. So obviously it tells us that grandma was a very pious person. He almost going on praying to God. So that's why he was a very, very religious lady or a pious lady. She hovered about the house in spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary. He was going on praying by counting the beads of a rosary. That's why she was always praying to God. Her silver locks, the great grey hairs, the silver locks were scattered untidily over the pale puckered face and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Inaudible, that is in a very slow sound, in a very murmuring way, in a very whispering way, she was going on praying while she was telling the beads of her rosary and going on praying all the time. And her silver locks means the grey hairs almost scatter the pale puckered face. Pale means it was not so bright and puckered because of the wrinkle. Then what happened? Her silver locks were scattered unprettily over her pale puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible. Not audible, inaudible. Yes, she was beautiful. She was a beautiful lady. She was like the winter's landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity. Serenity means the great calmness, steadiness, serenity, breathing peace and contentment. Now, the author was going on comparing the beauty of her grandmother's face because of the old age, because of the old age, the pale puckered face was very calm and quiet, and it was as if in winter season, if you look at the mountains of the near the horizon, then obviously it was looking very steady, calm, and it was of course the great scenic beauty of that instance almost overwhelmed you. So here the grandma's face was also like that. Means he was very calm, quiet, and almost rest in peace and contentment. This was what the exactly feelings of the writer about her grandma, because he loved her a lot. So here is some of the questions that answers I have given in the PDF. You have to check it and go for learning it, and you have to practice it again and again. Then after you will be perfect in unit 1. Then come to unit 2. Unit 2 is also a small one, you know. Grandmothers are generally very affectionate, protective and caring. Each and every grandmothers are really very protective, caring and affectionate towards their kids. Now, what sort of caring or what sort of affection really he had got? Let's come to the topic. Unit 2. My grandmother and I were good friends, because you know they were very good friends from the beginning, because they have to share their feelings, they have to share their sentiments with each other. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together, because the writer's parents went to the city for settlement, you know, struggle for existence. They have to struggle for their own existence. So only because of that, they had to stay back, the writer, with grandma in the village, and they went to the city. She used to wake me up in the morning. So what sort of care really grandma used to do in the very beginning, early in the beginning. So early in the morning, she used to wake me up and get me ready for school. That was the sole routine of the grandma, to waking up from bed and to brush her teeth and to prepare him to go to school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing-song. Monotonous means very disgusting way, because her tone is not exactly, not so melodious, not so beautiful, you know. So here the writer didn't like the great tune of her grandma, because that was not exactly in a so musical way. It was not exactly had a very good impact over him. Obviously, he had not he had not any bother about her voice. While she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart, because she was a lady of very spiritual lady. So she was going on singing while bathing and dressing the writer. Only because of that, the motto was that the writer has to get by heart, and the great teaching through her singing has to be get by heart by the writer. I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn. As I have told you from the very beginning, that he had a great distrust towards her old age games. In the what type of games she was being played at the time of her childhood, and what sort of prayers she was going on praying or singing. That was not exactly a fact of bother towards the writer. Then she would fetch means go and bring. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk. From the very beginning of my childhood also, we are going on writing everything on the slate and chalk. Likewise, the grandmother used to clean the wooden slate, and almost pasted the yellow chalk by which he can able to write on the slate. A tiny earthen ink pot and a reed pen. Reed pen, it is being made by a feather of a bird and to dip in the ink and go on writing. In this way, it was before the fountain pen was discovered, it was being written by the reed pen and the earthen ink pot. Tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. So when they used to go to the school, grandma used to give all the contents, what exactly it is required, while the teacher has to teach them in the school. All sorts of material has to be bundled up and handed it to the writer. They have to here to keep it and to go to school. After a breakfast of thick stale chapati, so far as from the very beginning Sikh community is concerned, they used to eat the thick chapatis, almost rolled with the butter and ghee, like that. That's why their physique is like that. Okay. So, after a breakfast of thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, because children are very much interested to go on eating the sweets. That's why. Chapati, the stale chapati means what exactly it is made previous night. So just today it was stale, and in that stale chapatis, because of the old age, how he could able to make the fresh chapatis, it was impossible. That's why grandma used to keep some stale chapatis and almost spread the butter with the sugar cane, and after that rolled it. So it will be very sweet. Only after that the writer or the any children can eat it because of its sweetness. So after a breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. After having breakfast, they went to school altogether. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs, and after the when they used to go to school, they have to take some more stale chapatis to feed the dogs. The village dogs are there, street dogs are there. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The school was attached to the temple. So she just almost reached at the temple and parted the writer with the school, and she went to the temple. And there what exactly she was doing? She was going on reading the great scriptures, because I have told you from the very beginning that she was an old and pious and very spiritual lady. So she used to read the great scriptures, means the great holy books like the Ramayana, the Gita, the Quran, or something like that, Then what happened? The priest taught us the alphabet. Yes, the priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer. Alphabet, A, B, C, D, like that. It is alphabet, Hindi, like that alphabet. And the morning prayer in a chorus. In a chorus means when you are going on singing a particular song in a group-wise manner. That is chorus. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda. Either side of the veranda, they are going on sitting and going on repeating the alphabets and the prayer. Either side of veranda. Veranda, its right phonetics is veranda. V-E-R-A-N-D-A. Veranda, not veranda. Veranda. Singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. In a group-wise manner, they are going on singing the chorus or the song. My grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures, while grandmother was inside the temple and going on reading the great scriptures, means holy books. This time the village dogs, when we had both finished, we would walk back together. When the school was over, and so far as grandma is concerned, when her reading of the holy books was over, obviously they again came back home, came back home altogether. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. At the time, the village dogs, because at the time of going to school, they are being bribed with these steel chapattis. So only because of hope of getting more and more, they are just waiting. They were just waiting outside of the temple. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapattis we threw to them. So whatever the little crumbs being thrown to them, those who had got, they are satisfied. Those who had not got, they are going on fighting and growling like that in a very disgusting sound creating by the dog. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapattis we threw to them. So this is the way they used to go to school, and while the priest was going on teaching the students, and while they were going on reciting the prayer in a chorus and the great alphabet, what exactly it is taught by the priest, at that time the grandmother was going on reading the scriptures by sitting inside the temple. When they both have finished, they again used to come back all together and came back to room. At the time, the village dogs were waiting at the gate of the temple for the hope of getting the loaves of breads. That was the sole routine of the grandma, and in this way, she almost taken the right care of the writer, and with great affection and love, he was almost bringing up him. So in this way, we have finished the unit 1 and unit 2, and unit 1 question answer and 2 answers that to be sent to you through PDF file. So you should have to go through it, practice it. If you have any doubt, then ask me. No problem is there. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.